Welcome back. You're watching the Power Breakfast Show. Now, as you've seen there, we're just remembering Mohawk, the lion that was put down about a week or 2 weeks ago. And this morning, we want to have that conversation, that of the human-wildlife conflict that's been taking place in Nairobi and, of course, different parts of the country. And we have a very, very big panel in studio this morning to join us in this conversation. And I also want you to be part of it. 22422 is the SMS line, or you can get us on Twitter. The hashtag is Power Breakfast. And like I said, we have a very big panel this morning, but I'll introduce the gentlemen who are with me here. Then Willis Raburu will introduce who's on his end, as well as Patrick Igunza. But on my left, I'm joined by Mr. Paul Davitu Masela. He's the KWS spokesperson, as well as the head of corporate communications. Thank you very much for joining us. And of course, my colleague, Mr. Mutegi Njau, who's also a member of this panel. Mr. Mutegi, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Good morning. Okay, well, listen, now you can introduce the people on your end.
Right, good morning. Because of the number, I'll allow them to introduce themselves. So they're also going to join us as part of this conversation. So you just introduce yourself to Mr. Mike.
Yes, my name is Jamie Ponte, and I'm with the Jane Goodall Institute for Roots and Shoots, mostly youth-based conservation.
My name is Samson Lenjer. I represent Soralo. It's a community-based organization that works between the Masai Mara National Reserve and the Amboseli National Park. That is those protected landscapes along the Kenya-Tanzanian border.
I am Robert Ndetei, working with the WWF. I am Steve Itela, working with African Network for Animal Welfare.
Okay. Patrick, we now hand over to you on that end to introduce us to your guests.
The panel, and we'll start with the gentleman on my left, and then we'll pass the mic across.
Thank you. My name is Jim. I'm working for Elephant Neighbor Center.
Good morning. My name is Dixon Kaelo. I work for Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association.
Good morning. I'm Paris Chendaria, a wildlife photographer.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Felicia Chandra from Kenyans United Against Poaching, Kuapo.
All right. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. And before we get into it, Felicia, there are no women who like animals? I'm shocked.
Yeah, we're feeling rather outnumbered.
Yeah. I mean, what's going on? Please assure me there are other women who fight for animal rights out there.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Very bad.
Mr. Gaditu, let's get the conversation going. And I guess the first question, did Mohawk have to die?
Mohawk didn't have to die. And what we saw was a situation where we have communications, and particularly of people, humans, not taking account of what the animals really would want and are doing, because Mohawk had actually a very bad experience at the beginning of this year, and because he's at the end where he's getting out of the system, if you like, because he's fairly old, about 13 years old, he was actually displaced. This is quite common in the animal kingdom, and particularly the lions. So he was kicked out by another lion that is called Dick, and therefore in the lion world, once you're kicked out, there is no appeal. You don't.
What do you mean
back.
kick out? What do you mean kick out?
Displaced.
Like he's no longer the king of the jungle.
He's no longer the king of that kingdom.
That pride. Okay.
Yeah. So once you are displaced, that's it. You actually move out, and you're supposed to find another territory, another place. And therefore, within the national park boundaries, he moved from Kingfisher, which is where he was the king, and was moved to the south towards the park boundary that is next to Kitengela, where he found Cheru, who was before that on Mombasa Road. And together with Alex, they kicked him out of that particular area because he's not welcome anywhere where there is already an established kingdom with the families. So for him to then be in Isinya, having been chased from their own world, and then to find himself in very unwelcoming humans, that's the beginning of the problem. And that is the reason that we say he didn't have to die. Humans should have been more considerate in terms of the communities that were coming out there. Once they noticed and they called to say that they had found him, they actually tried to chase him out of where he was hiding using four-wheel drive vehicles. And when KWS arrived and they cordoned the place using our own vehicles, the police, and even some of the communities actually offered 2 vehicles. But the crowds were very mischievous, and they would go around and try and reach where he was, and that meant that he was very agitated as at that time. And the moment that person started this motorbike, he thought this had gone way too far, and he lashed out and hit him. So that is what brought the problem, because then now human life was at stake, and that's the reason why the Rangers now decided to bring him down. So he didn't have to die.
Right. 2 things you've mentioned, and for me, you say he had been displaced from the animal kingdom. That is something that you knew. Did you monitor him? Because it also looks like he was left, like he was never monitored. Like now he's been displaced. We know he's 13 years old. His time is about to come to an end. Fine, let him roam. Were you monitoring him? Because again, like you said, he was found in Isinya. I'm assuming if you monitor the lion, you will know where he is, and you will know he poses a threat to the people of certain region. Were you monitoring him?
All the lions are monitored in terms of prides because of the way that they live in their families. Mohawk was not collared, so he wasn't monitored as an individual every single minute. But yes, generally you'd be able to tell that this is the area that they occupy, and they regularly move out in and out of the park boundary. But when you're looking at the lions of Nairobi National Park, you're looking at the lions in relation to the ecosystem. It's not the physical boundary of the park, because they usually would go out and they would come back. So that movement, the local movement, is normal.
It's a normal thing.
It's a normal thing. So it's not something that would have sent an alarm, like we've seen that they are fighting, that they are doing this fight, and at that particular point you're not worried about saying he's going to go and he's going to go in the south, and therefore let's go and put a fence and stop him. Because the natural way to do it is that they would go and then they establish their own territories using the parameters within the set rules of the kingdomship of the lions. So he was not there for a long time, maybe 2-3 days, because after he had been chased, of course he's trying to establish and find his bearing. So that is the reason that we cannot say that we knew for sure that that night he was going to Isinya, and therefore we should have stopped him from going. It's because he's not collared. There are only about 5 that are collared, and they are collared per pride, because it's a pride, it's the group. But going forward, we want to try and collar a few more. The Nairobi National Park lions are a bit peculiar when the scientists look at them, because the ratio of male-female is almost 1:1. But ordinarily, the males should be fewer and the females should be more. So this then means that at any one time you are finding many males getting into the age where they want to now control. So that's why naturally they have to then establish the dominant male, and that is the reason, and that's what has been going on. So you're able to now identify a number of dominant males even with that set area. Mohawk had a very close friend, they were together, who died naturally last year, towards the end of last year, and they pair, young males pair, and they stay together so that they can support each other, look out for each other. But ordinarily there should be one predominant male in that pride, and then the other males will subside, and they will be able to tell that it's not their time.
Okay.
So it's a normal kind of setup in the lion kingdom, and it's something that we observe, and we are able to keep that without interfering, because we want as much as possible for nature to take its own course.
Since you have said Mohawk was thrown out by the others, and where was he going to go? Since he was kicked off, they found a place where he went, found others who also didn't want to welcome.
They didn't want to welcome.
You cannot expect, therefore, he could have been welcomed by the human beings in Kitengela. Where was he going to go?
Yeah, in terms of the ecosystem, because it also goes up all the way to Kitengela, yes, the kind of expansion of the territory or establishment of new territories could include that particular Kitengela. But remember, for the migration pattern for Nairobi, it went all the way to Amboseli in the 80s, towards the end of 80s. And it also has a connection with Athi-Kapiti Plains. And in fact, there is one lion that actually came all the way from Amboseli, came to Nairobi, and then has gone to Kapiti and settled there. So that general area, or what we call the Kitengela Triangle, is the ecosystem part of which the lions would dominate. And once it goes and establishes its area, it is able now to tell whether it can actually stay or not. For this particular Isinya area where it went, it looks like the people were not welcoming it, or they didn't think that it was welcome there. So it probably would have been able to now go and search elsewhere, and most likely it may have even ended up at Athi-Kapiti, where it would be welcome, because they also have some other lions there. So this is what they do. They extend their territory, and they search and they create their own territory. It's not something that we would come in and tell it, please, let's go to Rongai, there's a farm.
But Paul, I'd like to know, is it the first time that we've had a lion being replaced by another, perhaps stronger or upcoming king of a pride? And how have you been able to handle previous scenarios of that nature?
Yeah, I think what has happened, particularly in this time, in fact, in the case of Nairobi National Park, the movements of wildlife in and out of that park, including to the north, which is now the area that has Langata Estate and so on, it's been long-standing. You have buffaloes that we brought from Ngong. We brought them to Nairobi National Park. We tagged them because we wanted to be sure what they were, and they decided to go back all the way to Kibiku Forest, which is in Ngong, and they used the main gate, Nairobi National Park main gate, and unfortunately one of the buffaloes was actually knocked there because of the speed of the vehicles, but they went back. Hyenas cross every day between us and the wildlife clubs of Kenya. Primates are an everyday thing. We would be called and told we have baboons here, we have babbits. The other day somebody drove into the KWS headquarters, really driving very hard, and we said, please, you know, you need to first of all drive slowly, and secondly you should go to the parking. And he said, no, I have an emergency. I have just seen warthogs wallowing on the southern bypass. And for him that was an emergency, because he says, why is wildlife out on this side? So the movement in and out of Nairobi National Park is a long-standing situation, and you'll have heard from Karen in Mukoma that they report lions go there. They put trap cameras with the idea of trying to catch thieves and make sure that any intruder. But then now they turn out with photographs of lions. So they say, oh, the lions are the ones visiting. In fact, we are not in danger now from any human intruders. We actually now have lions. So the movements are common. And the south, of course, because Nairobi National Park is a migratory park, they move out and the cats follow. So that means hyenas, jackals, lions, leopards will be following. And what's happening now with that area is the communities are beginning to embrace technology in terms of ensuring that their livestock are protected. So that is the reason why they would go even further, and the lions would go even further, because they can't find easy prey, even if they are trying to follow their regular prey. So they go into that area and they discover that they are not getting easy prey. So it's dynamics that have been happening over time, but I think what has happened right now is that people now have suddenly become very alive to the presence of this wildlife. The southern part, they are used to it because it happens every season. But this particular case of now coming onto Mombasa Road for the case of Cheru, and now going all the way to Isinya and being noticed for the case of Mohawk, it's the humans, it's us who are reacting differently. It's not that the migration is sudden or the move. Yeah, so it looks like there's something that has happened in us that we need to be able to check and
what about the the use of tranquilizers? There was a case, especially Mohawk, where they said that he was tranquilized. They waited around for an hour. They were poking him and stuff. Then he came to, and then it's when the attack happened. Yeah. And even after the attack, was the solution to put him down, or would a tranquilizer gun have been used? When is a tranquilizer gun? When is that? In
fact, if we pick it up from just where I had left, where we said that now he found himself in Isinya, trying to look around and asking where are people, meaning where are the lions that we should now link up and be friendly and form a new territory. The report then came across because one of the residents there noticed, and they reported to the police. And in fact, it was the deputy OCPD that called us and said there is a lion here. But in the meantime, the communities were trying to manage this lion by trying to encourage it to go, and the way they were doing it was by driving four-wheel drive vehicles and trying to shout and throw things at it, trying to get it out of, in fact, a bush where it was hiding, thinking that they should expose it, keep it in an open place, so that now they could call and then say for sure this is the one. But that is exactly contrary to what they should have done. They should leave it. The moment the lion now realizes that it's daybreak and it's in a very unfamiliar territory, it will actually hide, and if they left it in that bush that it had chosen, it would stay until nightfall to then be able to now do its mathematics, read the GPS, figure out exactly what's going on. So that is the way it should be left. But now they try to expose it and push it, and that means that they were stretching the patience of this lion. And then our team was called because darting is drugs, and these are controlled. So it's not all of us. I'm a warden, but I can't dart a lion. It's veterinary work, and it's properly controlled. So the veterinary team left Nairobi headquarters, and they were heading to that end. The work of these rangers who had come now from the nearest station, because what happens is that if something happens, we call the nearest team of KWS. For the case of Mombasa Road, we actually call the team that is based at the airport, and they are the ones who now responded fast before you mobilize now the rest of the teams. So this team from Kajiado got in there, and their brief is to keep the lion safe and keep the people safe. That is their brief. So they got there and they put this cordon, and they said, do not go beyond this particular point. What was very peculiar with that case is the way the excitement was created with the humans, and that's a very strange thing. The Maasai communities generally who are there have seen lions before. In the videos they were even saying that you know, this lion has caused problems, it's predated, which is not very usual, because they've seen them before. Then why the big numbers and the transporting open pickups? I saw over 20 vehicles. They were in all types and shapes, from Probox to four-wheel drive Prado to everybody seemed to be attracted, which was exceptional. So that is the reason why when the lion was now continuing to be made noise at and provoked, and it was getting late, and the team of the veterinary were getting towards that area, they actually were blocked because there was a jam as a result of these many vehicles going to the same site. And when they tried to go off-road, they actually got stuck in some cactus, and they sought the support of the communities and said, please come and help us to jack up this vehicle out. And they said, no, we are going to see the lion. And they never gave any assistance. So by the time they actually got out, the situation had gotten very rowdy at the point. And therefore the lion was very upset with these people who now, the person who actually started the motorbike, and he thought a motorbike was very fast. But he himself says that he was shocked at the speed at which this lion lacked out, and it hit him on the back and he fell, and it went like it was going towards checking whether or not he was ready for the fight. And at that point is when the rangers now shot in the air. And this is something he has never heard before. And I tell you, the sound of a live gun can shock the nerves out of everybody. And therefore Mohawk, hearing this sound, had never heard, thought in fact that it was coming from the person he had just hit. Could have been coming from anywhere, and he thought, this guy, I've just hit him, you mean he has sounds like this that are life-threatening? And he stopped. In fact, his attention, you can see, he stopped immediately. But rather than go back to where now he had come from, he actually lurched forward towards where the main crowds were. And it's very unfortunate because there were some 3 people on a white open pickup. And actually as he passed by, because there was a fence that was now blocking him from going further south, so he had to go kind of along the fence, but now he was heading to the main crowds. they actually speared him as he was passing that white pickup. So he's been dejected by his own people, meaning the other lions in the park. 2 days he's trying to establish a place. Here are people who are looking at him and causing noise and wondering who he is and trying to get him out of their place. So you can imagine the kind of level of agitation that lion was at. And when it lacked these other people, that's when the rangers decided that life was at stake for humans, and therefore they decided to bring him down.
All right, we want to open up the conversation now to our guest this morning, and the first person we want to talk to, of course, is Mohawk's very, very good friend. He took quite a number of pictures of Mohawk. Maybe we can start by finding out when you started, you know, taking pictures of Mohawk. Are you allowed to give him that name?
No.
Okay.
I'm new to wildlife photography. I've been doing it since 2008, but I moved to Nairobi 4 years ago. And actually, Mohawk is the first lion I saw in Nairobi National Park on my first ever game drive in Nairobi National Park. This year, I spent a lot of time with Mohawk. He was a fantastic lion, beautiful male lion, the king of Nairobi National Park. He was friendly. Every morning, I would go to the park and I would look for him. There's a place called Lone Tree in the park, and that was where he would stay most of the morning. He would be near Lone Tree and move to number 6 dam every morning. So I'd get to spend 1 hour with him. It was great. And he was a good lion.
And all these beautiful pictures we're seeing of Mohawk are thanks to you. So thank you for the good job that you've done and you continue to do. But now, you know, let's hear any questions that, you know, our panel might be having. And just a quick reminder, 22422 is the SMS line. Or if you want to get us on Twitter, the hashtag is #breakfast. We want to engage you back at home or in the office. So please get communicating. So let's start. Sir, you look like you have something to say. Please tell us your name again.
My name's Samson Lenjir. I work for the South, I consult rather for Soralo, but I've been a game warden in most of the the leading national reserves in this country. So I've worked in the Mara, in Samburu and in Isiolo. And more importantly, the story of Mohawk is so pathetic really, in my own opinion, as a game warden. Because yes, Paul has really enumerated how the conflicts of wildlife and human are. But more importantly, I think we need to understand that the human population has increased and encroached wildlife habitat. That's actually the bottom line. And animals know where they should be at any particular time. My observation as a wildlife manager is that I think the response team of Kenya Wildlife Services should have been more than what they have done. Number one is that you don't have to tag every other lion in the ecosystem, because honestly you cannot tag maybe 100 lions today. But I think the patrol teams need to have known where particular prides are, because Kitengela or Isenya is known to be a very prone human wildlife sport area. So that it's not an excuse for Kenya Wildlife Services, but I think they should take it as a more challenge, that we need to monitor where our lions go or our wildlife. It's not only the lions. Tomorrow it could be an elephant. Tomorrow it could be a leopard. But I think they should have probably responded more faster and taken probably a more measure than maybe tranquilizing. That thing, first of all. I think people could be agitated on the issue that lions have killed people, lions have killed livestock, but I think it is an history that we have learned so much. So I think the response part of Kenya Wildlife Services should be really more than what we have expected.
He has mentioned, thank you, Samson. He has mentioned the issue of, you know, human-wildlife conflict being noticed in specific areas in the country, and that KWS needs to then ensure that these particular areas that are considered hotspots have, I don't want to say better monitoring, but, you know, a higher level of monitoring. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think because we've mapped out the hotspots for human-wildlife conflict. If you look at Narok, it's one of the hotspots. If you look at Nairobi Kitengela, if you look at Taita Taveta, if you look at Laikipia, if you look at Lamu, so we are clear about those particular areas. And the specific species, we then monitor them based on what they are, because the way you monitor lions is different from the way you monitor crocodiles, is different from the way you monitor elephants, and these are the animals that cause us a lot of these issues. So yes, we know that we need to be a little more detailed in terms of the way we are monitoring, but it's not only KWS that should be doing it. There is a component about how we relate with the communities, because remember, wildlife is in places that are not protected to a very big extent. About 60% of our wildlife in Kenya is outside protected areas, and that is the reason why we are strengthening that side of relationships. So Bwana Kaelo's organization is looking at the community conservancies, because we know wildlife is more than just in the parks.
Yes.
And yet that wildlife is interrelated. So that is the reason why it's not so much KWS kind of like getting more collars. In fact, when I talked about adding collars, it is for specific prides.
Okay.
Yeah, so we need to be able to bring in the play of these other stakeholders, private ranchers, the community conservancies. They become very relevant, because wildlife monitoring needs to be an all-inclusive kind of situation.
Okay, all right. I can see your hand is up.
Yeah.
Ladies first.
Hi, I'm Felicia from Kuapo again. I think there's a micro question and a macro question for us when we consider Mohawk and what happened. So it's almost like he's the straw, the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, and which is why so many of us are speaking out and saying we need to change. But human-wildlife conflict is something that's been going on in Kenya for many, many years now. I mean, a long time. There are issues at Lake Jipe where lions were poisoned. There are issues near Samburu where lions have been speared, in Amboseli where elephants, I mean, all manner of conflict animals have been killed or poisoned, speared, or KWS has had to put them down. So when we talk about the micro issue, I think a lot of us are saying, let's use this opportunity. You know, what we're having here is, and I thank Citizen for this, it's a great thing that we're all sitting here and discussing this issue, but what we need is a formal inquest into exactly what happened. We've actually put in a letter from a whole bunch of organizations to KWS asking for this inquest. And why we're asking is because we want to learn, change, adapt. That is best practice. That is conservation best practice, and we need to start doing that here, because we can't keep having these situations. And that's the macro picture, because we do keep having these situations. There is human-wildlife conflict across Kenya. Whatever you know, the causes are: land use, human population, monitoring, under-resourced of Kenya Wildlife Service, for sure. There are lots of myriad reasons, but we need to now start addressing them. We can't keep excusing ourselves and say, we did our best. That was, you know, what was the headline? It was a regrettable, but had to happen. No, it didn't have to happen. We could have handled it much better, and we need to make those changes. We can't just sit back. And so that's why we're saying, let's formally look into this and figure out, you know, we've also actually gone to the ground. We sent a Kuapo member to Mbirika, where this happened, near Isinya, and he interviewed a whole bunch of local people there who are actually saying something quite different from what Bwana Paul is saying. So there are different stories. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle of these things, and we need to get to that so we can change and adapt and put in best practice.
Okay, all right. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Jamie Ponte with Jane Goodall Institute. And really we're, obviously the micro's there, and the macro is, I think there's just a huge invitation. I think everybody sitting here is KWS, we want you to work with us more with the community. And we really don't feel that you either know how or aren't willing. And I think there's a lot more collaring, and there's the science, and that stuff's happening, but we really need more, a lot more. And if your resources are strapped, there's a lot of us outside here that are willing to help. And that's what my plea is work with us more in the communication with the communities, because that's where we seem to be lacking the most on the macro or micro part of it. So.
Okay.
Maybe we can respond.
Yes, please respond.
Yes, I think in terms of looking at those, in fact, there were two lessons that I would put forward that we need to follow through. One, as I said, we found it strange in terms of the way the community reacted in that particular case, and that means that the instructions to follow a certain pattern didn't seem to be taken easily by these communities. So when we said keep on this side, don't disturb the land, let it be until we try and help it to get its geography, GPS right, they didn't want to listen. And that could be a message, there must be something else that the communities were either saying without saying. There could be something else that they wanted us to be able to address. And secondly, I think there is we saw the clips on the media, and I think the thing that really struck the heart of Kenyans is the exposure of this ranger shooting shooting Mohawk in a situation that was live, because you are removing life from this animal and you are showing it live. It's like if it's somebody who was caught and probably would be considered as a tag, filming when he's being hit with stones or rocks until he actually dies. I think the fact that it was shown live, a lot of the local media showed it live that way. A lot of the international media stopped at the point where the guns were shot and the lion was reactive in that particular case, and then they continued to narrate and they were able to show pictures. So it meant that the way young, particularly the very young, my own grandson said, the lion has been shot. He didn't understand, he wouldn't understand at the age of 6 as to what the circumstances were, but the fact that he was actually exposed to that live removal of life was something that we need to really be able to consider. It's not that it's wrong to record it and show it selectively to ensure that you do not have then create shock, because now the adults are grieving, and the pain and the anger is because they are reliving that situation over and over again. That the gun is there and the Mohawk is there and he's shot and he goes down, and we continue seeing up to the point where life is removed. I think that was a real shock treatment in terms of exposing it live, and it's something that now has really cost a lot of this feeling from the rest of people who saw that. So it's something that I think we can be able to learn, to be able to know exactly what do we show live and what do we narrate or what do we just show, because we've seen the Twin Towers. They celebrate or commemorate that every year. They don't try to get people to relive by showing the flames, So I think it's something that we learn from there, and then now we need to be able to get communities to really understand that we need to be able to let the professionals do their job, so that the vets should have been allowed to come through. What Raburu was asking before, the vets never got to site. There was no darting. The lion was never darted. Mohawk was never darted because it was being talked that he had been given half a dose. Yes. Then now when he was coming up, then now we
and we'll come to that.
It actually didn't happen. Just what he mentioned it. So
we'll come to that. Let's
interrupt for 1 minute because you have some breaking news. You have Chase Bank has been placed under receivership by the CBK. That is, Chase Bank has been placed under receivership by CBK, and I just read part of the statement that CBK has released. The Central Bank of Kenya has today, that is Thursday, April 7th, 2016, appointed the Kenya Deposit Insurance Corporation, that is the KDIC, as a receiver for Chase Bank Limited for a period of 12 months pursuant to provision of section 43.1, 43.2 and 53.1 of the Kenya Deposit Insurance Act. Chase Bank Limited was issued with the banking license. So it says the appointment of KDIC as a receiver for Chase Bank Limited has been carried out in interest of its depositors, creditors and members of public. So breaking news this morning, Chase Bank has been placed under receivership by the CDK, and KDIC has been appointed as the receiver for Chase Bank for a period of 12 months, and the central bank says that it is in the interest of depositors, creditors and members of public. We'll be giving you more details as and when they come, if we get some now and also later in our subsequent bulletin.
All right, thanks very much, Willis, for that. Before we move on, I want to pick up from something I'm hearing from the 2-3 people who've spoken, that there's a general feeling, as well as outside there's a general feeling that KWS is not working as hard as it should be in conserving our wildlife, and that's why we are seeing bodies from different parts coming together to do this job. And as they're trying to do this job, then they get equally frustrated, because then it's like their hand is cut off. We're trying to help, but you come and cut our hand off.
You're not cooperating.
You're not cooperating.
You're not cooperating with the community.
Yes, with the community,
another stakeholder.
And other stakeholders that are trying to preserve our wildlife. We want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, we are very open, and the Act itself actually provides for a very different way of managing wildlife in Kenya today. The Wildlife Act of 2013. So it's not something that they have to come and kind of plead with us. It's provided in the law. And that is the reason why the county conservation and compensation committees have been created. So that for each particular county, they already have a provision in law that they can now be able to now bring their issues. There is no county that will not be required to do a management plan for their area. And KWS in each of those committees is just the secretary. The chairman of that particular committee was appointed by the cabinet secretary through a competitive process. It was advertised and people filled, and they went through a long process of interviews. And then the members were appointed to that area through an elective process, so that they themselves, through the various county conservation associations, are able to elect their members to go on to that particular committee. And they have a chairman who is elected through, who's brought into office through a competitive process. And KWS, because of virtue of the technical input, then now becomes the secretary to that committee. Okay. So the provision for participation of the other members is open. It's open. And for the case of KWS, even at the headquarters, we have received the petitions. We have received the delegations who have come and said, give us answers to these questions, and we have put that together. And as Kuapo was pointing out, we have started an inquiry, because it's a provision, so that we can now be able to say what we are saying, but say it in a way that everybody else will contribute, including now the communities themselves. Okay. So that is open, and it's not like we are held up or we are closed.
Yes.
We are very, very open to any discussions. All
right, let's come this side. Sir, your name and then your question, and then we'll come back to you as a microphone to also, give us your name and ask your question.
My name is Dixon Kaelo from Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association, and we bring together landowners and communities that either own land privately or in groups, or even as communities living around our protected areas. And I think, first of all, talking about the Mohawk case, I think a number of lessons can be learned. I think the incident has already happened. I think there is every reason why we need, and Kenyans need to know what exactly happened. And there is a lot of lessons we can learn from that. And one of the lessons I think that is very important is the fact that wildlife remains to be wildlife. It doesn't matter what we do in the landscape. They are wild, and they have their patterns, and they have their behavior, and they stick to it. So whether or not you've lived in a place, if it is a wildlife corridor, if it is a grazing area for buffalo, they will always try to come. And every time they have to come, they will then pose a risk, and then you have to respond, and we get into situations like we had recently. I think also we must ask ourselves, how do we respond to these conflicts? We have 1 million children being born into this country every year. These young people, one of these days, will be adults. They want space. They want to build houses. They want to cultivate. They want to, own some land. And the only places that are available currently are areas that are used by wildlife. And so the big question is, how can we, as a country, develop in ways that allow conservation also to thrive? And so the big question is, lions, as Mr. Gazitu has described, will always be kicked out of territories. This is their natural way of surviving. Yes. And so where do they go? And how sure are we that wherever they go, they either survive well or they don't create conflicts in the communities? I think the other lesson we learn is the fact that I think we have a citizen in Kenya that is very, very passionate about our wildlife. If you look at the social media, there are a lot of Kenyans, even young people in colleges, the country all over are saying Mohawk shouldn't have been killed. And that gives me a lot of hope that wildlife do have a chance in this country, because in other places, everyone will be saying, if a lion comes, kill it. It is a threat to our life, kill it. But we saw a lot of Kenyans, including a lot that lived there, that were saying otherwise. And so I think that is something we can cultivate as a country. Okay. Lastly, I think the question about what we do when these territories, to maintain these territories. I think as Kenya Wildlife Conservancy Association, we think that landowners and communities have a very real chance of contributing to reducing these conflicts through creating what we call safe havens. The community in Kitengela, the reason this is a big problem now is because in the past there was a conservation lease program that was running in the Kitengela region, and communities were being paid an amount of money to be friendly to conservation and to keep their land open. That program came to an end. And so over the last few years, we have people who feel that wildlife are just posing a threat and they are not getting any benefits out of it, and they are suffering costs. The wildlife come with a cost. The wildebeest, for example, bring a disease called malignant catarrhal fever, which kills livestock. And some of the breeds that are kept there are valued at 100,000 shillings, and one of them can just die because there is no cure for this disease. And so the question has been that, how do we create a partnership that supports our protected areas? Our parks are only 8% of the country. Our wildlife require at least about 25% of our country. So already there is a lot of wildlife. Paul has already mentioned that more than 60% of our wildlife are not even in parks. They are in community and private lands. And I think the question then we should ask ourselves is, why have we coexisted for so many years? We should also actually celebrate that, and we should look at it and say, how can we cultivate that collaboration sort of going forward? The communities in Kitengela lately have been discussing the idea of creating conservancies around the park to allow Mohawk and other lions that will be displaced, because the lions that displaced Mohawk next year or the year after will be displaced. And so where does it go? And we will keep having this cycle of conflict unless we can actually create space. And that's why as communities and as landowners, we feel that the best way to respond to these conflicts is to create that space, that safe space, where we can use our land in ways that don't injure wildlife. Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's go to you with the mic and then can give this gentleman.
Stevie Teller is my name, from African Network for Animal Welfare. And I also want to speak from the perspective of being a board member of Friends of Nairobi National Park, just to echo onto some of the comments that have been said, that we have different information from what KWS has about the history of Mohawk as a lion, and the frequency of his absence from the park, where he goes and he comes and that sort of thing. That if Friends of Nairobi National Park was to write the story of Mohawk, it would be completely different from the story that KWS has. So we need to work together so that we get it right, because once the public out senses that there is a disconnect between information that is out and what an authority like KWS is talking about, it brings some elements of dissentiment and outcry, and you find KWS now being on the receiving side from the negative aspect. So I think my plea to KWS is, let's work hand in hand and let's get that information moving on accurately. The other thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to commend the Kenyans, and particularly the media, for having picked this issue at this particular point, because like we said, animals do get out. Communities coexist with animals. I think the biggest challenge right now is interference with the space that animals have actually preoccupied over a period of time. That space is dwindling over a period of time, and I think I'd wanted as Paul at least to be a little bit honest about the infrastructure projects that are threatening Nairobi National Park, and see exactly how we can secure that particular space so that our animals are safe. The moment you try to interfere with a particular habitat, then you get animals also adapt different behaviors because of that interference. And that is what we are seeing not only in Nairobi National Park, we'll be seeing this all over across the country because of infrastructure projects within protected area, and the ones that Dickson Kaelo has also spoken about, the 60% wildlife that is out there. Kenyans need to be resilient to such issues, and they need to sort of get into the understanding of the concept of conservation and how the landscape is changing. Finally, there is also a need right now, particularly to fast track on some of the things that Paul has mentioned. The County Wildlife Compensation Committees, I think, requires urgent action from the government, not KWS. The committees are there, they are not functioning. Those are the committees that have the mandate to handle human-wildlife conflict at the county level. Without those committees working, believe me, all the blame will come to KWS, yet the responsibility of handling human-wildlife conflict is actually at the government level. So we need to separate these two things and actually push the government to actually get these committees working so that those conflict issues can be mitigated in a human way.
Okay, thank you. And we'll come to you, don't worry. We'll come to you. Yes, sir.
I think the case that happened with the Mohawk in Nairobi National Park, Paul has outlined the lessons that they have learned. But I think that problem is a problem that can be addressed by all of us as Kenyans. One, if you look at how land tenure in Kenya has changed over time, you realize that most of the areas where wildlife used to exist, and even existing today, has been transferred into individual ownership. A landowner would look at his land in terms of how much he gets from that land. If wildlife is going to coexist with human beings must get benefits from this wildlife. The other thing is, looking at Nairobi National Park at the moment now, I think there are certain decisions that we must make based on available information, based on how the animals are using the ecosystem. And one of the things that we may need to do, Paul talked of animals going out of the park, the baboons going out of the park. There is technology to control that wildlife inside Nairobi National Park. Where I'm sitting from, when I look at Nairobi National Park, I don't see us having a chance whereby we are going to have a dispersal area. If you look at the community currently living in the Kitengela Triangle, it's an affluent community. Some of the people have never lived with wildlife before. If you look at the pastoral community there, they have also changed their lifestyle. It might be the high time that we look at these scenarios and decide Nairobi National Park must be fenced, if we are going to avoid other scenarios where we'll see more lions being killed, where we are going to see more people being killed by human beings. The other thing is, as we think of development, we have talked of this, that development must take place, it must be sustainable, and it must ensure all forms of economic investments also take place. If you look at the current framework, it provides the countries, the counties to come up with spatial plans. Spatial plans will enable people to zone their land, their specific area, and decide what type of land use are you going to put in place in the various ecological zones. You realize when you look at most of the places, for example, the Kemana, which is next to Amboseli and the Savos, is an area where wildlife used to go. But currently that area is under agriculture, irrigated agriculture. It's not only that place. Look at another place where there is water. We are converting that land into irrigation and growing crops. The question that we need to ask ourselves as Kenyans is growing crops the only form of economic investment that we can have, or we have other forms of investments that we can have that can bring income and benefits to the people? Or do we need, if we have to grow maize, do we have to grow maize in every corner of this country, or there are other crops that can be grown within the same agroecological areas, crops that do not attract wildlife? And that way we will be able to encourage communities to live with wildlife. Communities will be able to see benefits from this wildlife, and the communities will be able to see more returns, better income from the land that they have as a result of doing land use planning and putting the land in the appropriate land use type.
All right, maybe you can comment before we continue with this conversation.
Thank you. My name is Jim Nyam once again. I personally didn't know Mohawk. Must be sincere that. I have been studying elephants for quite a number of years, and I've been working in this country, talking to people and all these things. However, the lesson from the particular case which Paul have been able to talk about that, I have few issues here which I would wish to take about, and I've seen Kenyans here, and we must be very sensitive. I know that Kenyans, when you hear that there is a bomb in this car, instead of running away, we go closer to the vehicle. And it's unfortunate that that lion had to be eliminated, and so many Kenyans were crying it should have not been killed. But my question is, and I've listened to many Kenyans, even here in Nairobi, if you ask Kenyans here, how many people have gone to Nairobi Park? How many people have even visited the national museums? It created a scenario whereby it was, to me, it was a mob support.
Mob psychology.
Mob psychology. We were just supporting, and there was a lot of blames in KWS. I've been working and listening to Kenyans in this country, and people don't want to see KWS. Ask them why, they have no reasons. We are talking of a perpetual attitude here. Most Kenyans, maybe Mzee here, those are people who love wildlife. Most of our young people in this country, if a lion would walk in Nairobi town, you would see how people just want to kill the animal. What am I saying? The case of Mohawk is a replica of what is happening in other parks, like in Mara, like in Amboseli, like in Savo. But it's only that there is very few people who would come out and talk about this. For the last 3-4 months this year, when the lions started coming out of Nairobi Park, Kenyans have become very informed in Nairobi here about lions. And there has been even a lot of issues that they have seen a lion, which is not the case. Like the lion that was along Gong Road, and it was not a lion. So what are we talking about? We have seen the conservation, and like the panel we have here, we seem to be like, could be we are preaching to the choir. All of us here, we all come from different perspectives on conservation. It's a high time we change the narratives, like what Dixon have said here. Conservation in this country has not been given priority, even by the government. How do you even put a road in the park? The infrastructure development. If you go to Naivasha and speak now, KenGen have dominated in the park. All the animals that are inside the park, Hell's Gate, they are now outside. When that animal causes a problem, where is KWS? Animal has found you in your house because they have been chased from the park. Over 60%, the entire Laikipia Saburu is not at a KWS. But if an animal do anything there, where is this KWS? I think it's a high time we even get the political goodwill. We've lost Amboseli as an ecosystem, as as my friend Robert has said, the elephants now are within the park. I think this year we have lost quite a number, almost about 10 elephants. They have been shot by KWS. We have even seen community killing elephants. The next thing, after we are able to manage the poaching in this country, will be the conflict. As we speak about the hyenas and the baboons, we'll be managing even the buffaloes that you hear are walking from the main gate. Simply because what are they teaching us a lesson? We must give conservation a priority in this country.
It must be top priority. All right, Mr. Kalisu, the two things I've been able to pick up from this is the issue of infrastructure. We're seeing a lot of infrastructure, taking place. We're seeing new buildings coming up and potentially interfering with this space that has been reserved for, our animals. Second thing is population is growing. With the population growing, there needs to be space for these people who are coming. Like Dixon said, 1,000 children are born, a million children are born every year. They will grow up, and where will they go? We'd like to hear what KWS is doing in regard to this, because there's also been the rumor that the reason as to why these lions are running, out wild is because we want to push them out, so that we can take over the land and start doing our own construction. There's that rumor that's been going around on social media. So we'd want to know the position of KWS when it comes to preserving this area that has been put aside for wildlife.
Yeah, in fact, that discussion about the issue of wanting to take Nairobi Park and turn it into real estate is not new. In fact, it began in the year 2000, and it's been passed through. What we have noticed, particularly because now you're looking at the park and its boundary, but when it comes to wildlife management, you must look at it in relation to the ecosystem. And the part that is on the northern side, obviously, that is very occupied. Anything outside that fence, we do not have control. And it's something that the reason why actually it becomes an ecosystem issue, because then you want to say, as you develop that industry, as you build these estates, what is the relationship between you and the park? Ordinarily, there should actually be a buffer, and that buffer should be very clear, so that in case there's an overflow, animals get out, then they're able to go into that particular area. The only little strip that is anything that you consider the buffer is actually just next to the airport, which is what they call the main runway into the JKIA, and therefore that area is not developed and it's left, and that means that if the wildlife for any reason comes onto that particular space, they're not running straight into people. But look what happened when Chair was on that side. They get out and they raid a boma that is constructed right next to the park. So coming close to the park is one of the items, and Kenyans are very possessive in terms of very capitalistic in the way that they are looking at things, and that is the reason why they would say, this is my land, I have a title, you have no business telling me what to do with my land. And that is the reason why the relationship with the southern part of the park has been through these programs, the lease program that Kylo was talking about, and appealing to the Kenyans' sense of coexistence. So that's the reason that he's saying, they are saying that they don't mind if they start conservancies, so that it is not owned by government. There's some form of resistance to anything that the government comes and says, would like to try and convert this into protected land under the Lands Act, or convert it to KWS, for example. There's a portion that is called Sheep and Goat, 2,912 acres of land right next to Nairobi National Park. And it belongs to government, but actually it belonged to the community before. It's not part of the park. But every evening, wildlife moves into that area because they have other considerations to do with security, high grounds. They move into that particular area. And the agreement between the communities are protecting that land. So when it was grabbed and people wanted to come and try and do constructions, the communities actually went there and moved in and constructed their own boma, and they watched it literally, vigilantly, and in fact one of the community members was actually shot by the police as a result of that insistence. and they say they do not want to see any kind of development in that area. But they allow wildlife to go in there. And the reason why in the first place they gave that land without subdividing it and taking it up was because they wanted their livestock to be passing in through. From the interactions with the communities of Kitengela, it is clear in their minds, if wildlife goes, their livestock will go. And if their livestock goes, they will go. So that is the reason why they would not be in a hurry to convert the whole piece of land and give it out to other people. And yes, there have been a lot of people who've gone there and bought, planted eucalyptus trees, started universities or colleges, built real estate. But the areas that are in agreement and where the communities have been able to give their consent is the areas that the wildlife now is migrating through. Through a scientific process, 60,000 acres was identified as the land that is required for migration. Using indigenous knowledge and transposing it with the technology and science, we were able to actually now route the migrations. So even talking to the communities and putting them on that list program was targeted, because it is specific, that it's not the whole of Kitengela that you want, because that's not where the animals would go. So for the south, we have really strongly depended on the goodwill, fully realizing that they own the land, they have their titles, and therefore it means that our engagement must truly be based on equal partnership. It's not like we're telling them that they must move out or they must leave it. So that is one of the points for us. On the north, it's very difficult, because the moment we put in that fence line to show that this is the park boundary, the developments just went on. So the wildlife that used to move from Nairobi National Park into the area that now is occupied around Lukenya Hill, those Machakos ranches that, as we used to call them, that has completely disappeared. So whether it's Konza, or whether you're looking at the cement factory next to Athriva, or whether you're looking at the university next to Lukenya, all that land used to have wildlife. And it's not a long time ago, just recently. So these conversions have obviously taken the land that wildlife was occupying, and so is the big story of Syokimau. Wildlife used to go literally right up to the fence. We used to go to the airport to run animals out so that planes could land. But now, with a lot of the developments in that particular area, it's completely changed. And that is the reason why, because I'm talking about this ecosystem management plan, because then it brings in the other players, the ones who deal with land policy. And when they were developing the land policy, we were actually part of that team. And we mapped out in the whole country to tell them that this area is the migratory route. This area is the dispersal route for this particular ecosystem.
And were they followed?
They were mapped, but they've not been gazetted. So that's something with the Ministry of Lands. And the moment they are now gazetted, that is where now we can be able to actually now come and say this area is protected for the purposes of migration, and we can have a much bigger say.
But what about the cases that we're hearing about? The southern bypass and all the construction, the SGRs, and the argument that I think the construction, there is a fence that they live through, and before, like you said rightly, that before anything is done, the communities are stakeholders, so they are consulted. For the animals, it would be that the KWS is their voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
For infrastructure.
Yeah. So then what happened in terms of that area?
The mega infrastructure has been one that has had impact. We are still trying to check to see the full extent. But the moment that the SGR went across the Savos, because that was the biggest portion, the information that we used were the normal migratory routes for the elephants in particular, but generally for wildlife. And we were able to then advise the technical people who are doing the construction, the engineers, that this is the correct place for passage, and therefore this is where you would leave open for the wildlife to pass through. And just last week, 2 weeks ago, they went out and they collared elephants. And when they were doing that exercise, 3 of them actually crossed through one of the underpasses. So it showed that they have learned very quickly that there is a new installation which they had never seen before, and that the areas they used to pass, they were very, very shy initially to go to that particular portion because they can clearly see there's something new. But the fact that they actually crossed and they were recorded, it means that they have now decided to adopt and check and go through. For the case of Nairobi National Park, the portion that is cleared through the discussions between the Land Commission and the Kenya Railways Board and KWS Board is on the southeastern point, which is just very close to Athi River. And at that particular point, the discussions between the three organizations was that the line, the SGR line, needed to be as straight as possible in whatever portion that it goes. The park boundary at that point is a little meandering, and therefore they decided that they needed to cut across. And out of the discussions that they had, it was going to cut across the park, which is very close to Alan Donovan's, there's a house that is a museum now, that belongs to the Heritage House, and they decided to now put it right next. What KWS requested out of that discussion is for that particular portion, for the railway line or the SGR to be raised, so that later the wildlife could then be able to utilize that portion. There is a small portion that was left outside in terms of now the line crossing. In terms of the SGR passing through there, what has been approved is passage. And in terms of law, the park boundary has not been changed. The land has not been given to any other authority. It still remains KWS land, and it is because the law itself provides a very tedious process for altering park boundary. So that is why that now becomes an easement, to allow the passage of the SGR at that particular point. And this is the same also with the northern part, where we have the southern bypass. The moment that, and I know that a lot of NGOs who are supporting conservation went all the way up to NEMA, they went to the tribunal to protest and to say that that southern bypass shouldn't pass through any part of the park. But eventually it was decided in favor of the Highways Authority, and that means that that particular portion again was cut. Again, there is a very small portion that is left, and that is a very big challenge because it's a road and it's on the ground. It's not like the SGR that is raised and wildlife would pass through. Yeah, so this means that that would have to be fenced and would have to be managed by KWS on its own as a small island. It's a very small island at that point, because you can't tell wildlife to then cross when you have all this traffic that is going to be cutting across there. To the eye, it looks like it's a terrible kind of impact on the environment, and that's part of the reason why when they're doing that construction, remember, wildlife is very sensitive. It really is able to pick a lot of the goings on. When we had tsunami, you must have heard about this, that wildlife actually left the beach. Even where they had elephants and they were riding, they left the beach because they had already sensed that eruption that happened in the ocean. So even here, during the construction, this grounding and drilling and hammering and all this work will definitely have an impact on the wildlife, and they will move away, at least even if it's temporarily for that time of the construction, they will move away. And then later on, if it is quiet, that's the time they might be able to pass through. So we may not be able to right now ascertain or say that the impact to the individual species is at this level, but it's a study that has already been commissioned to be able to now check the actual impact of those two particular mega infrastructure. Remember, there is also a pipeline that goes across the park. Remember, there is the Kentraco power lines that have gone through the park, and therefore all these are being looked at because they seem to be concentrated at the southeastern part of Nairobi National Park. So it's not like they are just being left, or people are giving, or KWS is giving way, but it's out of these discussions because it's government institutions, and eventually if the decision is taken that it must pass through that particular case, then we put up the case to be able to now protect the environment And in certain instances, like for what has already been approved, it is actually mitigation. Exactly how will you do? Now, during that construction, they actually do temporary fences, because we insist that wildlife should not get into that construction site, and then now we have issues with the construction and the people around there. So they put specific fences for that, just the construction site, and that has happened for both the road and the SGR. And when they are now working, particularly for the SGR, that's why we found that they had difficulties, because they had big machines, and in the turning they actually damaged now the kind of like the new fence line that we had put in place. And that is a big problem, because once it is hit, it means that the power line that is going through is interfered with. So certain times you will find that the power has to be switched off because of the construction, and particularly if they're installing the new fence. And that could also be a time when wildlife is able to tell. Incidentally, they are very good at telling when a line is powered or it's not powered.
Okay.
But for all the cases that we have had, there is no case that is associated solely to the infrastructure. There is no case that you can say that it is because of the SGR that this has happened. It looks like there is a number of factors that are playing around, and for the case of the lions, the Langata lions, the female was secluding herself to try and raise these cubs. We went to disturb her in the barracks, so she decided to do a decoy, do more survey to find out whether she could find another place. She thought Kibera was the place, because initially when she found Langata barracks, of course she said this is the perfect place, you know, with KDF, why else would it be as safe as this? And then KWS, we came in and we really disturbed them there. So they went out into Langata and they were trying to figure out how they could distract us from the cubs and also find a new place. But it turned out that Kibera was not the new place. So they actually went back, and eventually we got them back into the park. For Cheru, they went to raid this place that had livestock right next to the park. He lost his direction. 6:30 in the morning, he finds himself on Mombasa Road. Everybody, he thought he knew all these vehicles. They used to come to the park, but they are hooting, they are shouting, and he's trying to get his bearing. He goes a short while, he meets with somebody who really he just shoves aside. You can see that it was not an intended attack. That's very different from the way that Mohawk actually lashed out at this person with the motorbike. This was more a shove of get out of my way, I'm trying to find the park. And shortly after that, in that steel industry, he went back, went to the flight path and went straight back to the park. We didn't have to drive him back. We didn't bring in a helicopter.
So they know where they're supposed to be.
They know,
once in a while they go off track, and then, you know, but they know where
they know where they're supposed, where they can go back to. So that is the situation. So there is no case of these lions that we have had, including now Mohawk, that is directly related to infrastructure.
Okay.
But we are not saying that infrastructure does not have an impact. It does. And we are trying now to be able to get more details into exactly what extent and what is the impact on this.
We're coming to the end of the show, but there's one gentleman who's joined us, and I hear his is a very unique story. Sir, if you could please give him the microphone. Kindly tell us your name, where you're from, and why you're here with us.
My name is Michael Mbithi. I initially did the lion identification program with my colleague David Mascal in 2011 in Nairobi National Park. We came up with a database. You hear of names like Cheru, Mohawk, Sam, Simbeo. Those are the names we gave them. And the idea behind that at that time was to foster conservation through fame, to bring out these animals as personalities, and to actually tell people, you know, these are actually compatriots on this earth. Because at that time we had a very major issue with the conflict on the corridor, especially in Kitengela. Whenever it rains and the plains game move out of the park into the dispersal areas, the lions follow. And what follows after that is the lions, basically predators, are wired in such a way that they will usually go after the most plentiful prey. And in Kitengela, the most plentiful prey is actually cattle, sheep and goats. So when the lions get out there, they don't see why they shouldn't go after cattle, sheep and goats. And this creates a problem because, as you might have heard, in between 1997 and 2003, we lost over 57 lions in all those almost 6 years, and the park population that stood at a mere 6 lions at the end of it, from 38 lions. And this scenario used to happen every other big rainfall, and so we wanted to get to find out which lions these are, give them names, introduce them to the public, introduce them to the communities, because the communities out there actually use Facebook, they are on social media, and you find, for example, right now, people will call you and tell you, we're with such and such a lion next to Mpakasi Primary School, and the kids are scared, can somebody come and push it back to the park? Because, you know, as everyone knows, Kenya used to be wildlife all over the place and communities all over the place, but now we are pushing the animals back into shrinking areas. So basically, these lions look at the whole ecosystem as their own. They look all the way to Kajiado, all the way to the Athi-Kapiti as a place that they used to roam.
This is theirs. It's all theirs.
Yes,
they're the ones who are interfering with their space.
Including where KCC stands. You know?
And why the name Mohawk? I mean, what inspired that?
Well, Mohawk, when we found him, he had a very clear-cut, hung, like, you know, Mohawk kind of hairstyle.
Okay.
His mane had just sprouted in the middle, and he had a blazing black mane, as you can see. It's always been jet black. One interesting thing about Mohawk is that he was a Casanova in the park. There was Sam, Simbeo, and Cheru, who were the Ivory Trio, and they used to chase him around. He didn't want to join them at that time. He used to play hide and seek with them. He never really got into a serious fight. But interestingly enough, with these guys out fighting with the Athi coalition was Mzee, Akil, and Sandy. When they were out fighting with this coalition, Mohawk would be the one with the females. Any females, all liked him.
It's a Mohawk. So it's the hairstyle.
Most of the cars right now actually is.
It's the main style. Okay.
Sorry, please. I would wish to know, do you see future in our wildlife, especially when it comes to the population of lions? And if we are to sustain it so that our children, you mentioned your grandchildren, are going to witness and see this kind of wildlife that identifies Kenya as a tourist destination, what is it that we need to do as a country?
Okay, I'm a big believer in hope, and I'm a big believer in God, and I do see future, especially when I see gentlemen like Dickson Kailo here and Paul Gaditu, because when I look at it, conservation will only survive through communities conserving wildlife, and KWS also conserving wildlife in the parks and reserves. 75% of Kenya's wildlife is outside parks and reserves. That is a resource. It's not a menace. And there are people who live with it. For example, I came from a ranch this morning. Yesterday, I was following lions that were hanging around the boma. We live with lions. We have cows. A lot of people live with lions. A lot of people live with elephants and leopards. The issue is, how are we going to mitigate any conflicts, and how are we going to put a value beyond a sentimental value? How are we going to get an economic value? And one of the answers we have so far is conservancies, where communities can actually go into nature-based enterprises and get an economic value from having the wildlife. And what that generates, you know, if an accountant did the maths, it wouldn't be a lot in terms of money, but what that generates, it generates a lot of pride. For example, if you look at what the NRT, Northern Rangers Trust, have done in the north, there's a lot of pride in the communities and them having their conservancies and their wildlife, to the point that they would even want to have rhinos, which are very expensive to protect and keep. So, for example, on the Kitengela side, we are working on the Nairobi National Park Community Conservancy. Right now we have about 3,000 acres. We're working on it with the Wildlife Foundation, and FONAP is also included. And in the midst of all that, we're looking at varied business models to try and make sense, because this is an area where the animals move in and out. I would like to also say one other thing. If you look at the trends from the Amboseli ecosystem of elephants and lions, we have more than we had 10 years ago. We have lions moving up all the way north into Machakos County. The lions of the Attica PT are actually from the Amboseli ecosystem. We have elephants all the way almost to Kajiado town, and this is because of conservation and because of conservancies coming around the Amboseli National Park. There are more lions actually outside the park than there are inside the park, and so I look at this as well.
There's hope. All right, we're coming to the end of the show, and I just want to hear from Mr. Kadetu. So now, what happens the next time I encounter a lion, I encounter an elephant? Because you've said the biggest issue is we tend to, stress them, we tend to agitate them. So what should I do?
Yeah, I think Biz brought in a very good perspective in terms of understanding the lions from a human perspective, humanizing the relationships. And if you come across wildlife, if you come across lions, first of all, you need to stay safe, meaning that pay attention to what you're doing, what's around you. The mzee called Odori, who was hit by Cheru, said that he actually heard all these noises and all these hooting. But as a regular Kenyan and Nairobian, he just continued walking. He didn't know, he says they didn't shout lion, they didn't say anything, so he just continued like there was nothing happening. So I think there's need to stay safe, meaning that be attentive, figure out what's going on without necessarily endangering yourself, make sure that other people are safe, particularly if you can be able to see them. Then do not disturb the animal, do not provoke it, do not throw things at it, do not shout at it. Stay calm, which I know is a very difficult advice to give to somebody who's coming for the first time or even meeting a lion. So stay calm, because then your faculty of thinking is going to be a little more stable in terms of the way you are looking at. And then contact KWS if you can. If you can't, call for help, the nearest law enforcement agents. Anybody, in fact, if there's somebody in a building, tell them to do that call, or if there's somebody in a vehicle. But I think the key points are stay safe and ensure that you do not disturb, provoke the animal. Let the experts come and deal with the situation.
All right, thank you. We're coming to the end of the show, and we're taking final comments from each one of you. So you'll just hand over the mic, then we'll calm down like this. Final comments, please make them short and simple.
Learning from what has happened in Nairobi National Park, as Kenyans, we must make the right decisions in terms of how we are going to use our land, how we are going to develop our land, how we are going to invest, so that the current investment does not compromise the generations to come. And that way, we are going to secure the different developments and investments that we have in this country.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think, to me, the most important thing is that we have to be factual and truthful to the citizenry of this country, because more times we cannot come candidly to really face the facts, and that's why KWS get a lot of blame. So it's good to call us a spade or a spoon a spoon. I mean, own it, don't be defensive. Number two is that we need to tell the Kenyan government. I think it's a awakening call today that all our national parks and reserves do not have buffer zones. So where is the 70% of wildlife going to be? The solution is empower community conservancy so that we may have modified landscapes where wildlife can roam.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think we're going to keep repeating a little bit, but I think we're all on the same page. I think we know the answers. I think now we have to figure out how to implement these answers and do it together. And strongly, one thing I really, KWS, we need to reach out to you. You need to reach out to us. That's the only way we're going to get past this stigma that KWS has, that there's some lack of trust. And we have some new leadership there, that this is a perfect time to help push those things forth. And finally, KWS isn't going to fix this. Us sitting here isn't going to fix this. Kenya citizens are the only ones, and we have to have so many people to stand up and fix this. So.
For me, my points are basically one. That when we talk about a challenge that engages everyone, is we need to be unified first of all. When we have a government also pushing for infrastructure development in a protected area, we need to be engaged. So the level of engagement between the decision makers on development infrastructure projects is much more or less. It's only narrowed on a few individuals, but it doesn't bring all the expertise that is out here. And I'm using that in relation to all the things that I've seen going. They don't look at the migratory patterns. They don't look at the ungazetted corridors that have already been mapped. And they don't look at the land use practices of a particular ecosystem. In short, I'm saying we need to dialogue. And we need to come up with very good measures moving forward.
Okay. The mic on the side.
Thank you. I think from where I also sit, look at three issues here. One, as Kenyans, we must value wildlife. What is the value of wildlife? There is value on economic value. There is aesthetical value. You know, like all of us here, we talk about why we love animals, why most Kenyans were looking forward to see Mohawk. And lastly, as scientists here, we have to embrace the ecological values. But all these things has to be packaged in a way that communities can understand. And I mean this, we have to support the wildlife agencies by awareness. Personally, I've been doing this awareness by walking. And I'm now engaging walking to Tanzania, Kampala, back here. Because this information that Paul and I has, and anybody else here, our communities, in wherever they sit, they will not understand. When we speak about more scientific facts here, they may not be able to understand. So we need to package in a way, and that's why I mentioned earlier, we need to change the narratives, you know, such a way that my grandfather, my mom, back in wherever she sits, she can see the reason why. It's unfortunate even some of our members of parliament have no idea even why we should have hyenas. I mean, we need to come to that point that when you see a hyena, what does it mean to you? You don't have to get 500 shillings from Paul that this came from an elephant, this came from a hyena. There is more value that comes from this wildlife that is not money, but there is aesthetical value and there is ecological value. Thank you so much.
Change the narrative. Change the narrative.
Thank you very much. I think if you look at our history, we have always, as a people, coexisted with wildlife. And we have demonstrated to the world that it is possible to coexist with wildlife. When we know how to do it, we know how to react when there is a lion in the midst. And we have lost a bit of that. We need the right policies, we need the right incentives, we need the right support and political goodwill for the rest of the wildlife that's outside of the parks to continue. Where there is a good justification to do fencing, fencing is one option. But before we do the fencing, let's look at the many other options that are available. Keeping conservation as a beneficial land use is a possibility in this country. We have a vibrant tourism industry. We are a recognized brand. We have wildlife that very few other countries have, and I think we need to face the reality that our scenario has changed. We now have more people than we had a few years back. We now are doing more development than we are doing, and that requires us to develop new ways of thinking in order to conserve our wildlife. And I think there is every possibility in this country for us to be the leader in Africa in conserving wildlife, not just inside the park, but also in areas outside the park.
Thank you.
I think a lot has been said. Two key things I'll pick on are awareness. Communities living with wildlife need more awareness. They need to be included in crafting solutions in how they will coexist with the wildlife. We've taken it for granted that since, for example, the Maasais have lived with lions and elephants all their history, that they will continue to do so. But we do not see that they have also changed. Their dynamics have changed. Their social economics have changed. The size of land that they have has changed. And so we need to come in and help them make that move, that change. Because the spaces are smaller, what drives their livelihoods is different, and how then they would live with the animals has to also be different. But the thing is, you cannot pick up a solution and take it to a community and tell them, employ it. You have to make the solution with them. You have to be hands-on. You have to show them that they can actually do it. It's a case of either buying a man a fish or teaching him how to fish. Second thing I would say is we still have a lot of landowners out there, communities, private landowners who have land either on livestock or just lying idle. I say, invest in our wildlife. Wildlife is worth 2 cows. And I say that out of experience. Invest in our wildlife.
Okay. All right.
Great. I guess what I would like to say and what we're all feeling here is there is a lot of hope. Coexistence, inclusion, not exclusion, tolerance. We have solutions in Kenya that are working really well. Community participation is key, as a lot of the gentlemen here have said. And I think the way forward is inclusion. When you include communities in making decisions about a problem animal or a lion, you get a very different result. When they feel that they are part and parcel of the solution, you get a very different result. And furthermore, I think that conservation narrative, how it can possibly change, we've all kind of said it, wild animals will take care of themselves. We need to address things about social well-being in this country. And once we address social well-being together with land use and economic value and prestige, all of those things, you'll see conservation and wildlife will automatically just continue. But it's that social well-being.
All right. Thank you very much to each and every one of you who joined us this morning. Really happy to have had that conversation. It's been engaging, but there's hope. Like you've all said, there's hope. And there's need for the partnership between the community and KWS. That needs to take place. So I guess after this, you all have a role to play. We all have a role to play in ensuring that we have wildlife 20 years from now, 30 years from now.
You can all go for breakfast. Hash out the issues.
Yes. That will always be done. Well, thank you very much once again, and on behalf of everyone who makes this show a success, we're coming to the end of the Power Breakfast show for this Thursday morning. I want to say thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow. It's Friday tomorrow. You know how we do it. If you don't, tune in from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Bye. Be kind to one another. Take care. Don't forget to smile. Mutegi, Raburu, Igunza, they all say goodbye, all right? Yeah, wave to the camera and say bye. All right.
Good.